Hello everyone. This is actually video 2 in the discrimination series. The first video, I do not know if y'all can actually see it or not. It's called disability discrimination. It says that it has 3 views and 2 likes, but I can only view it in studio. I cannot just see it in my listed videos or on the home feed of my channel. But it's not set as private or anything. It's just not appearing for some reason. So if any of y'all can locate that video and give it a like or comment on it or something to maybe throw it into an algorithm or something, that would be totally appreciated, because this video is not going to be the 45 minutes or whatever that other video was. But it's a second video, so it the other one needs to be found. It's a mind fuck. Anyway, this video is going to be about religious discrimination. It is the second one in the series, even if I have to re-upload that other one again later. But religious discrimination involves treating a person, an applicant or an employee, unfavorably because of his or her religious beliefs. The law protects not only people who belong to traditional organized religions such as Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and Judaism, but also others who have sincerely held religious, ethical, or moral beliefs, and those fall under the lines of Santeria, Satanism, Wicca, Voodoo, the list goes on and on. Religious discrimination can also involve treating someone differently because that person is married to or associated with an individual of a particular religion. Religious discrimination and work situations. The law forbids discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment, including hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, fringe benefits, and any other term or condition of employment. Religious discrimination and harassment. It is illegal to harass a person because of his or her religion. Harassment can include, for example, offensive remarks about a person's religious beliefs or practices. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that aren't very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as the victim being fired or demoted. The harasser can be a victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not an employee of the employer, such as a client or a customer. Religious discrimination and segregation. Title VII also prohibits workplace or job segregation based on religion, including religious garb and grooming practices, such as assigning an employee to a non-customer contact position because of actual or feared customer preference. Religious discrimination and reasonable accommodation. The law requires an employer or other covered entity to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices, unless doing so would cause more than a minimal burden on the operations of the employer's business. This means an employer may be required to make reasonable adjustments to the work environment that will allow an employee to practice his or her religion. Examples of some common religious accommodations include flexible scheduling, voluntary shift substitutions or swaps, job reassignments, and modifications to workplace policies or practice. I have a friend that is Muslim, and he actually won a lawsuit because his employer would not give him his prayer time. And that ended up being a like a huge thing, and now all employees are actually allowed to take a break um, when it coincides with his prayer time. That way, I mean, of course, obviously, somebody's going to be there to check out customers and stuff, but um, for the most part, he actually opened many, many, many doors for people that work at that place that I will not name at this point because they did end up doing the right thing. Religious accommodations, dress, and grooming policies. Unless it would be an undue hardship on the employer's operation of its business, an employer must reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices. This implies not only to schedule changes or leave for religious observances, but also such things as dress or grooming practices that an employee has for religious reasons. This might include, for example, wearing a particular head covering or other religious dress, such as the Jewish yarmulke. Don't correct me, or yeah, please correct me on how you say that. But, or a Muslim headscarf, or wearing certain hairstyles or facial hair, such as Rastafarian dreadlocks or thick uncut hair and beard. It also includes an employee's observance of a religious prohibition against wearing certain garments, such as pants or miniskirts. When an employee or applicant needs a dress or grooming accommodation for religious reasons, he or she should notify the employer that he or she needs such an accommodation for religious reasons. If the employer reasonably needs more information, the employer and the employee should engage in an interactive process to discuss the request. If it would not pose an undue hardship, the employer must grant the accommodation. Religious discrimination and reasonable accommodation and undue hardship. An employer does not have to accommodate an employee's religious beliefs or practices if doing so would cause undue hardship to the employer. An accommodation may cause undue hardship if it is costly, compromises workplace safety, decreases workplace efficiency, infringes on the rights of other employees, or requires other employees to do more than their share of potentially hazardous or burdensome work. Religious discrimination and employment policy practices. An employee cannot be forced to participate or not participate in a religious activity as a condition of employment. And if you have ever been discriminated against for religion, you can contact the EEOC headquarters at 131 M Street, Northeast Washington, D.C., 20507. Their video phone line is 1-844-234-5122, and their TTY line is 1-800-669-6820. Now, for a little bit more on that. So, what if you're facing religious discrimination at work? Title VII of the Civil Rights Act prohibits employers with 15 or more employees from discriminating on the basis of religion. State or local anti-discrimination laws may cover employers with fewer employees. If you work for local, state, or federal governments, additional legal protections may exist. If your employer is covered by an anti-discrimination law, you have the right to be free from religious harassment that creates a hostile work environment. If asked, your employer must provide a reasonable accommodation for your religious practices. An accommodation is not considered reasonable if it causes the employer an undue hardship, compromises safety, or imposes significant cost. What to do if your rights are violated? You can file a complaint with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You may be able to file a complaint with the comparable state or local agency. You can also contact the ACLU in your state for more information. So, if you're facing religious discrimination in housing, your rights. The Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits religious discrimination in the rental, sale, and financing of homes, with some exemptions, for small owner-occupied buildings. It also prohibits the inclusion of discriminatory terms and conditions as part of a home sale or rental. State and local laws may provide additional protections. You can't be turned away from renting or buying a home because of your religion or receive less favorable terms and conditions. You can't be charged more for renting or buying a home or for a mortgage because of your faith or lack of faith. Your neighbors cannot threaten, harass, or intimidate you because of your faith or lack of faith. So what to do if your rights are violated? You can file a fair housing complaint online with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. You also may be able to file a complaint with a comparable state or local agency as well as the ACLU in your state. So, facing religious discrimination at a public school, your rights. School officials may not incorporate prayer or other religious activities into class or school events such as football games, assemblies, or award ceremonies. School officials, including coaches and other staff, may not participate in prayer or other religious activities with students during school or at any other time they are acting in their official capacities as school employees. School officials may not facilitate, approve of, or otherwise encourage student prayer or other student religious activities. School officials may not impose their faith on students by preaching or teaching religious doctrines such as creationism as truth. School officials may not read scripture from religious texts to students or require students read those texts without a secular academic reason for doing so. School officials may not invite outside guests to preach or otherwise promote religious message to students during the school day or during school events. School officials may not display religious symbols and iconography in school unless they have a secular academic reason for doing so, and unless the display avoids signaling support for religious generally or any particular faith. School officials may not discriminate against you based on your religious beliefs. School officials cannot deny you the same opportunities and privileges provided to students of other faiths. School officials are required by law to maintain a school environment free of religious harassment by other students. You have the right to express your religious beliefs at school. For example, you may pray individually or in groups and discuss your religious views with your classmates during student activity times like recess or lunch, provided that you are not disruptive. You may express your religious beliefs in your schoolwork if they are relevant to the assignment. You may pass out religious literature to classmates, subject to the same rules that apply to other materials students distribute. School officials may be required to permit you to wear religious clothing or religious head covering, such as the hijab, depending on the circumstances of your particular situation. School officials may be required to excuse your absence for religious holidays. What to do if your rights are violated? You can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division or the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights, the OCR, using OCR's electronic complaint form. You may also be able to file a complaint with the comparable state and local agencies or your school district or the ACLU in your state. Facing religious discrimination by a business. Your rights. Under Title II of the Civil Rights Act, certain places of business, such as most restaurants, hotels, movie theaters, sports arenas, stadiums, and other entertainment venues, are called public accommodations. Public accommodations cannot discriminate against customers based on their religion. You have the right to the full use and enjoyment of these places regardless of your faith. Some state and local law may prohibit religious discrimination by other types of businesses such as retail stores. Public accommodations cannot turn you away because of your hijab, yarmulke, turban, or other religious appearance or dress, or demand that you remove it in order to obtain goods or services. If your rights have been violated, you can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice's Housing and Civil Enforcement Division. You may also be able to file with comparable state or local agencies as well as the ACLU in your state. So, concerned about religious discrimination at an airport or border crossing. Your rights. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, officers frequently stop, detain, and search individuals or their personal items, including laptops or cell phones, at the border, even if there is nothing suspicious about the person or their luggage. CBP has the authority to ask your immigration status when you are entering the United States or leaving the country. If you are a U.S. citizen and you have presented a valid passport, you do not have to answer officers' questions, although refusing to answer questions about the nature and purpose of your travel could result in further inspection and delay. If you are a lawful permanent resident, we recommend that you answer officers' questions. If you are a non-citizen visa holder, you may be denied entry into the U.S. if you refuse to answer officers' questions. However, officers may not select you for questioning based on your religion, race, national origin, gender, ethnicity, or political beliefs. If you are a U.S. citizen and the officer's questions become intrusive, you have the right to ask for an attorney before answering any questions. If you are a lawful permanent resident, your right to talk to a lawyer depends on the circumstances. If you are a non-citizen visa holder, you may ask to speak with an attorney, but you generally do not have the right to consult one before answering officers' questions. If officers inform you that you are under arrest, or it becomes clear that they suspect you have committed a crime, you have the right to talk to a lawyer before answering any questions, regardless of your immigration status. You have the right to be free from discriminatory questioning or removal by airline employees. Pilots may refuse to fly a passenger if they reasonably believe, based on observation, that the passenger is a safety threat. However, pilots may not question you or refuse to allow you on the flight because of a stereotype based on religion. You have the right to wear your religious head coverings during an airport security screening unless you trigger an alarm and Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, staff request additional screening. They may conduct a pat down of your head covering or ask you to remove it. You have the right to request that the pat down or removal be conducted by a person of your gender in a private area. If you do not want the TSA officer to touch your head covering, you may refuse and say that you would prefer to pat it down yourself. The TSA officer may supervise you as you pat down your own head covering. Then rub your hands with a small cotton cloth and place it on a machine to test for chemical residue. If you pass this chemical residue test, you should be allowed to proceed. The house of worship is facing discrimination. Federal law prohibits zoning boards from treating some religions better or worse than others when it comes to building, renovating, or operating houses of worship or using property for other religious purposes. Zoning officials can't treat religious institutions less favorable than comparable non-religious institutions, like civic organizations, when it comes to land use decisions. Federal law provides special protections that help houses of worship when local zoning laws would significantly impede their ability to build, renovate, or operate their facilities, or otherwise use their property for religious purposes. In these instances, local zoning boards must be able to show that applying a challenged zoning rule to the particular house of worship furthers an extremely important, in legal terms, compelling governmental interest, like safety or environmental protection. Zoning boards also must show that there is no other reasonable way to go about protecting that interest. If the zoning board cannot show this, it must permit the house of worship to proceed with its plans. So, facing religious discrimination in prison. Your rights. Federal law provides special protections for prisoners' religious exercise. If a prison policy, rule, or practice significantly impedes your ability to practice your sincerely held religious beliefs, prison officials must show that applying the rule to you furthers an extremely important, in legal terms, compelling governmental interest. Example, prisoner's safety or health. And that there is no other reasonable way to go about protecting that interest. If prison officials cannot show this, they must provide a religious accommodation to enable you to practice your faith. Depending on your particular circumstances, prison officials may be required to provide you with a religious diet, worship services, and access to clergy. They may also be required to allow you to have religious texts, wear certain religious clothing, headwear, or jewelry, and maintain religious grooming practices, wearing a beard or long hair, for example. Prison officials cannot impose religious beliefs or practices on you. They cannot punish you for declining to take part in religious activities or events that include religious elements. Prison officials cannot give special preferences to members of one faith or treat prisoners of some religions less favorable than others. If your rights have been violated, you can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice's Special Litigation Division or the ACLU in your state. Okay, now this last little bit. What protections do federal employees have from discriminations? Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 protects employees and job applicants from discrimination based on religion. Title VII also requires employers to reasonably accommodate the religious practice of any employee or prospective employee unless doing so would create an undue hardship on the employer. So what is religious discrimination? Religion discrimination is treating individuals different because of their religion's beliefs and practices, and or their requests for accommodations of their religious beliefs and practices. It also includes treating individuals different because of their lack of religious beliefs or practices. Religion Religious practices are not just those required by a church or other religious group, but include moral or ethical beliefs as to what is right and wrong, and that are sincerely held with the strength of traditional religious views. Beliefs may be religious in nature even if no religious group holds such beliefs, or religious groups to which others in the workplace belong do not accept such beliefs. What kinds of discrimination practices are prohibited? It is illegal to discriminate based on religion in any aspect of employment, including hiring, firing, compensation, assignment, and classification of employees. Harassment based on religion is also prohibited. The law also prohibits harassment or any other employment action based on any of these following. Affiliation. An individual's affiliation with a particular religious group, for example, harassing an individual because she or he practices Buddhism. Characteristics. Characteristics such as a dress associated with a particular religion. For example, harassing someone wearing a body covering or a headscarf for their religion. Perception. Harassing or otherwise discriminating against somebody because of their perception or belief that a person is a member of a particular religious group, whether or not that perception is correct. For example, firing a Sikh for wearing a turban because the supervisor thought he was Muslim. Association. Harassing or otherwise discriminating against somebody because of the individual's association with the person or organization of a particular religion. For example, giving an employee less desirable assignments because her husband is Catholic, or refusing to promote an employee because he attends a particular church. Title VII also forbids retaliation against a person because he or she has opposed unlawful religious discrimination or participated in a complaint process by filing a claim, testifying, assisting, or practicing in any manner in an investigation proceeding or hearing under Title VII. What is unlawful harassment based on religion? Employees must provide a workplace that is free and of unlawful harassment based on religion. Harassment based on religion can take many different forms, including religious slurs, workplace graffiti, or other offensive verbal or physical conduct directed towards any religious group that is so severe or pervasive that the individual being harassed reasonably finds the work environment to be hostile or abusive. Employers may be liable not only for harassment by supervisors, but also by coworkers or by non-employees under the supervisor's control. What is reasonable accommodations in the context of religious belief and practices? Title VII requires employees to reasonably accommodate the religious practices of an employee or prospective employee unless to do so would create undue hardship upon the employer. Reasonable accommodations is a change in the workplace rule or policy. Some examples are flexible scheduling, voluntary substitutions or swaps, job reassignments, and lateral transfers. In addition, employers may not schedule examinations or other selection activities in conflict with the prospective employee's religious needs. Inquire about an applicant's future availability at certain times, maintain a restrictive dress code, or refuse to allow observances for the Sabbath or religious holiday unless the employer can provide that not doing so would cause an undue hardship. When are employees required to accommodate employees' religious beliefs and practices? Generally, where workers articulate a need for an accommodation of their religious beliefs or practices in the workplace, the employer is required to accommodate them. However, employees are not required to make accommodations that would cause them undue hardship. And I really feel like a lot of employers claim the undue hardship when it actually isn't. It's just them being an ass. So if you request an accommodation, you have to answer the questions about religious beliefs or practices. In most cases, whether or not a practice or belief is religious, it's not an issue. If it is an issue, the employer has some room to ask you about your beliefs to determine whether the beliefs are religious within the meaning of Title VII and whether they are sincerely held. How can you raise a claim of religious discrimination in the EEO complaint process? Contact your Bureau EEO officer to initiate EEO counseling. To preserve your right to file a formal complaint, you must do this within 45 days of the action you believe is discriminatory and when you first knew or should have known of the possible discrimination. Your EEO counselor can also give you information about other possible avenues of redress for your claim. Now, with that being said, there is a lot of religious discrimination that goes on in workplaces. And especially when you get into things like home health or working in nursing homes, mental facilities, things where, or police stations even, or lawyers' offices, stores. You get a place where you have a variety of people, and for an example, nursing homes. You walk into a nursing home, you always see a cross on the wall. There's always a cross on the wall. It may be in a hallway, it may be in the cafeteria, but there's always a cross on the wall. A lot of the patients that reside there may not be Christian. And there is nothing wrong with hanging a cross on the wall. But a family member can go in and throw a fit because that cross is on the wall and their family member is not of that faith. So they take the cross down to accommodate this set of patients, and another family member goes in and complains because the cross is no longer on the wall. It goes against their beliefs of, not having the religious marker there. So it's really hard to make everybody in a workplace, a school, an office, or whatever happy and content. That is where the whole aspect of respect comes in. It is very important to respect your coworkers or your co-students or your boss or your employees, because respect goes a long way, even if some accommodations cannot be fully met or you don't find the need to ask for the accommodations. Respect goes a long way, because respect shows that you do care and that you accept that person as they are. But if you have had your civil rights discriminated against on the religious aspect, file a complaint. Don't be scared to take that step, because you file your complaint and you never know how many people that have worked in that place or setting a ground line for people who will eventually be working at that place. It gives them a voice as well. You may be the one to take that first step, but you never know how many people is going to come out and support you and also maybe file a claim. It can be a lot bigger than just you. So don't ever fear filing a complaint because you deserve to be protected. Nobody deserves to be discriminated against. Have a good day, everybody.